So guys, as you can tell by the fact that I am still wearing the same shirt that I was wearing in the last video, not much time has elapsed. Maybe, I think it's been maybe 2 hours. So, it's another cold steel. So you guys know that I have my tie light with the Zytel handles, and I have the smaller version of this. So I had a customer reach out to me, and we've got to ask the question. Now let me lock in this. Is that too much? Let's see. Maybe we'll turn the brightness down on this. Maybe we'll turn it down instead of turning it up. The question is, how much knife is too much knife? Guys, if you're wearing headphones, stand by because here it comes. So a lot of that was humor. So what we're looking at here is I had a customer bring me one of the new tie light. This is the tie light 6, the VI. This one is in Geez, Mike, it's not that hard. It's 3 letters. CTS XHP. So this is a Carpenter steel, XHP, and this is way bigger than the one I have. Now, how much is too much knife? That was kind of a joke, but the fact is, this is a huge knife, and I can't see carrying something like this, but some people do. But what I wanted to talk about is, all joking aside, the issues with these stiletto style blades. So this isn't necessarily about the tie light, which I've already done a video about the tie light. I like it. It's a nice little stiletto knife. Real reminiscent of the Italian switchblades that you would get. Same kind of blade style, same kind of overall feel, but it's not a switchblade. It deploys well, and this actually has a wave esque feature. Ernie, don't get upset, and I don't want to get Lynn in trouble. A wave-esque feature that is, I think that's a better light for this, is very easy to deploy. The Quillian on this actually catches a pair of pants really well and deploys the knife. This is a nice smooth deployment. Any way you deploy it, these things deploy well. Mine, I tighten down real tight. So what we're gonna look at is, I'm gonna show you what some of the issue I have with this blade style. People are like, oh, they'll send them to me and they're like, oh, the knife isn't sharp. This is where we're getting to this. This customer came to me with this knife. He goes, man, it feels sharp, but it just won't cut. Well, there's a reason for that. There's absolutely a reason for that. And we're gonna get into that, and I'm gonna show you, but we're gonna turn this around and we're gonna take a look at these knives, and I'll explain to you a little bit as to why these knives never quite cut the way you really want them to. All right, guys, let's take a look at these blades each. Now, both of these knives are the exact same blade shape. And the issue that I have with these blades, and it's going to be real easy to see, I think, here, just a little bit of glare on that. I'm still getting used to this new light. You can see that this blade is not real narrow, per se, compared to, let's say this. I mean, this blade really isn't that much broader. This knife cuts so much better than this knife. Now, I have mitigated it on my version a little bit, but one of the problems that you have with these knives is this blade is really thick behind the edge. Now, if you look, I brought the bevel on this way back on my personal one, and I do believe that this has got a little bit of a micro bevel on it at the very front, and it's got some nicks and chips and things. I've used this knife for stuff it should have been used for. But this knife is really sharp, but it still does not cut
the way I'd want it to. It's a fairly thick blade stock. Fairly thick blade stock here that is not going to lend itself to wanting to cut real well. And then this one, comparatively, I believe this one's even, it might be the same thickness. Let's look at the thumb. Nah, this one's a little bit thicker. Well, the problem is, and it's not just the cold steel Tylite, it's all knives of this bayonet style that is indicative of the stilettos. There's not a lot of room here for this to transition to a sharpened, good, tight, sharpened edge. Now, I did sharpen this. It is sharp. It's razor sharp. It's hair popping sharp. However, it's never going to be that slicey knife because the way it transitions. It comes down from this thick material starting in the middle so that you have this bayonet style where it's a relatively thin blade widthwise with a thick blade stock, and then you're starting in the middle to do your transition. Thinner behind the edge usually is thicker or wider blade stock. Wider blade stock, you can get away with thicker, and a lot of times you'll start here, and you can thin if you're doing a full flat or say a hollow, you can get away with that. But these are really thick, and I mean, when I say thick, that's the thickness. There's my edge bevel. That's the thickness behind the edge there. It is really thick, guys. Let's see, can we bring it in so you can see? See how that edge transitions down, and it does not have a lot of, that is a very thick edge on this blade. And there's not a lot I can do about it for this customer. So it's going to place challenges for him to try and use this for doing anything that requires a lot of fine slicing and things like this. This one, not quite as bad. I brought the bevels way back on this. Oh yeah, you can see I've got some rolls and nicks in this blade. But this one wound up being a lot slicier, but then again, thinner blade stock. And it just, these blades just never lend themselves to being slicey. So let's turn this around, and I'll lay this out for you a little bit more, because people ask sometimes, like we had the big conversation about Rockwell.
So, oh wait, I'm trying to adjust this. There we go, guys. Let me lock in on that. I like that. I like that right there. So I'm still trying to figure out this new light. So one of the things that we had the big conversation about, and there was, I'm done working for the day. I'm filming, so I am drinking a beer. One of the things that we did talk about when we had the big discussion about Rockwell is, and I had my thing about what I look for in a knife, and Rockwell being on a blade shape, and depending on what I want to use that knife for, is real important. And so the edge geometry a lot of times is dependent on blade stock thickness and blade width. And I don't mean sometimes, it always is. So how thin a knife is going to be is going to determine how well it cuts through certain things. The problem you wind up with is a thinner edge with less material is going to be a little bit more prone. Hear me out, because I know you've all seen Big Brown Bear flexing the tip on his knives he makes. That's amazing. But that edge on a thinner knife, depending on heat treat, things like that, could be brittle, and it could chip. And so you got to play that game of how wide, how wide do I want a knife to be to suit my purposes? So let's take this for instance. This knife is super slicey. This is the prototype for the Scorpion that I'm sure that is going to be released through Honest EDC sometime in the next year or so. This blade stock was really thin. This was a prototype. I used what I had available. It's a really thin piece of 440C. So with that already being thin, and I did a full flat grind, that knife is almost non-existent behind the edge. Now, that's great. This thing is really super, super slicey and frightening. And I feel remiss in having made it for my daughter. I feel as though I may have given her something dangerous. But, she cuts herself, she'll learn how to handle a knife. Something like that, broader blade, thinner stock, super thin behind the edge, it's going to cut real well. that edge might not hold, depending on the steel. Like I said, steel and heat treat. So there's a little quandary there. Thicker blade stock with maybe a thinner grind with more material behind it, so you get a thinner edge, might be the way you want to go. But like I said, so when you get a knife and you expect it to be sharp and slicey and cut, and then it feels sharp, but then it just doesn't do anything, that's one of those things that you've got to take a look at and file that away in your memory and go, okay, this is what I bought. This is where I went wrong, and these are the things I need to look for next time. Now, do I like this knife? Yeah, I like this knife. This knife's fun. It's a cool, fun little thing to have. That it's a stiletto, but it's not a switchblade. It snaps open with authority. It pops right open. It's great, and it's attractive. It's cool. It's got that cool factor like you would expect. But is it something that I'm going to do a lot of cutting down cardboard boxes and things with? No. Nope, and neither is this great big monster here that my customer sent me. So this wasn't a diatribe about cold steel. It just so happened I had 2 cold steel knives in back-to-back videos, mine and then a customer's. Now, this actually, for as big and bulky as this, it's comfortable. It is comfortable. I'm going to get into the knife a little bit, even though that's not what this video is about. This is a relatively comfortable knife, but I'll show you something else about these knives that it irritates me. There is the termination of the grind, and there's your sharpening notch. Why? Why cold steel? And people are like, oh, that's where the stop pin is. This knife does not have a stop pin. It doesn't, per se. I mean, it does have a spot on the liner where it catches, but it is not that groove. And people are like, well, how do you know? I was like, well, because I completely took it out of mine, completely took that entire area out, and it did not affect the way this blade shuts, and it didn't affect how far it goes in, and it doesn't hit against anything. It gets into the detent right where we're supposed to. So it was just a matter of that got put in the wrong place and ground incorrectly. And every one of the tie lights is like that. So, but back to the original intent of this is, if you're going to buy a knife, know what the purpose of it is going to be, know what you're going to do with it, and then have some thought to yourself, how thick is the blade stock, how narrow is the blade, and how much is that going to allow it to taper. This easily, if this had been a hollow ground, could have been much, much thinner. I'm not saying it would have been perfect, but these style knives would have been better with a hollow grind here. Now, the fact is, this knife is meant for piercing. That's what this knife is. This is a knife that's meant for piercing. The stilettos always were. They've always been a stabbing style weapon. You're gonna run into some of these problems with daggers, any of the thin dagger blades where it's a double-edged and it just doesn't have much transition time from the middle spine out. They're never gonna be the slicey, thin, cut-through material the way you want it to knife. They never will, because that's not what they were for. They were not meant for that. Something like this, or many of the other knives I carry, like this is still a little thicker behind the blade, and I will. This is that Bob Terzuola CTF that got released through Mastrop. Much, much, much slicier and thinner behind the edge than either of these, but still thicker than most of the knives I would carry. So, broader blade, flat grind or hollow grind, how far back does the transition start? Those are things, if you're wanting a knife that you're going to use for doing a lot of slicing and cutting and things like that, those would be the things that you would be looking for when you buy the knife, that should be indicators of what you're going to be able to do with it. So, like I said, another video 2 days in a row, or 2 videos in a day. This probably won't go up. So if you're watching this, I am still wearing the same clothes. It's not the next day. I am still filming this the same day as the video I just did about that cold steel push dagger. So, guys, that's the end of the video. If you guys like the videos, give them a thumbs up. If you don't like them, give them a thumbs down. Edge geometry, blade geometry things, those are things that kind of get overlooked. If you guys like these kind of topics, let me know. In this corner is going to be I haven't decided yet, a link to something. There'll be something down here. Maybe my daughter's skating channel. Up here is going to be a link to a video that YouTube thinks you like, and over here will be a subscription link. Like I said before, if you are on a phone, you gotta have your notifications enabled if you want to get what I'm doing. And if you're on a computer, there's like different levels. There's no notifications, there's silent. There's one that is some notifications, and there's one that's all. If you don't want to see everything I put up a lot of stuff. I'm not gonna lie, I do know this. then put it on sometimes, and then just go in every once in a while and check. And then down in this corner is going to be a link to the Patreon, so that if you guys want to support the channel for things like this light that obviously I'm using, that I'm just, I like it. I like it. It's allowing me to do some stuff I couldn't do before, but it's going to require some playing. There's different lighting modules and different types. I don't like if I like the blue, and I don't like the red, but I definitely like this one. So things like that, that's what the Patreon does for the channel. And if you want to make a trip to, like I said, I want to go to Chris Reeve Knives, but I can't afford to do it without the Patreon. I can't do stuff for the channel like that on my own dime, not the channel. If it was something I just wanted to go, I would go, but I can't afford to. And if you guys want us to go and take video there, then definitely. There are some local places though. Not to say that everything that is going to require us going someplace is going to cost you guys through the Patreon. There are a couple local places. Half Face Blades is here. As soon as I can get a hold of Andy and find out when he's not real busy and not out on a trip, we'll go there. And what's the ones they made out of Anza Knives. Anza Knives is just down the road here. I just have to get them on the phone and say, hey, I would like to come by and do some filming for the channel. So those things are probably going to happen. All right, guys, I've wasted enough of your time for a day. I'm going to get off of here. The other video is uploading. This video is still got to get edited. I will talk to you guys later. Have a good evening, and I'll talk to you later. I'll catch you in the next video.